The alien empire attacked Earth during a solar storm. Humans had been waiting for it. Far above the clouds, on a small metal station that circled the Earth, a woman named Dr. Mira Solis watched a screen full of orange lines. The lines jumped and shook like a heartbeat gone wild. She had watched this same screen for 11 years. Today, the lines were louder than she had ever seen them. "It's close now," she said to the empty room. Closer than the models said. Mira was a solar scientist. Her job was to study the sun. But for the last 11 years, her real job had been secret. She was not just watching the sun. She was watching for something else, something hiding behind the sun's fire. And now, she was almost sure she had found it. She picked up a small radio and pressed the button. "This is Solis. Send the code word to command. Tell them, autumn storm is real. I repeat, autumn storm is real." Far below, in a deep bunker under the Rocky Mountains, a red light began to blink on a wall full of screens. A tall woman in a gray uniform looked up from her coffee. Her name was General Elena Cross, and she was the head of Earth's newest defense group, a group so secret that most people on the planet did not know it was real. It was called the Solar Shield Program. "General," said a young officer, "we have the signal from Solis Station. Autumn storm is confirmed." Elena put down her cup. Her hands did not shake, but her heart beat faster. For 11 years, she had trained for this one moment. Now it was here. "Wake up the president," she said quietly. "Wake up every base. Wake up the world. Tell them the day has come." To understand why this moment mattered so much, we must go back 11 years, to the day everything changed. It began with a strange radio signal from deep space. A team of scientists in Australia picked it up first. It was not random noise. It had a pattern, like a code. For 3 months, the world's best scientists tried to understand it. Then, a young mathematician named Dr. Marcus Chen cracked part of the pattern. What he found made his blood run cold. The signal was a warning, not from friends, from something that called itself, in the closest words humans could translate, the Dominion. The message said this: "We have watched your world for a long time. Your kind is young, loud, and weak. When your star grows angry, as it does every 11 years, we will come. Your machines will fail. Your weapons will die. You cannot stop the storm, and you cannot stop us." At first, world leaders thought it was a joke, or a trick by some other country. But then more signals came. Small probes were found in the outer parts of our solar system, spinning quietly, watching. They were not human-made. They were old, strange, and clearly built by something far ahead of human science. The truth became clear. Earth was being watched by an alien empire. And that empire planned to attack during a solar storm, when the sun's activity would be strong enough to knock out satellites, radios, and power grids across the planet. The aliens believed that without power, without satellites, and without communication, humans would be helpless. They believed a storm would be the perfect cover for an invasion. Most people never learned any of this. The world's leaders decided it was safer to keep it secret, to avoid panic. But a small group of the smartest scientists, engineers, and soldiers on the planet were called together in one quiet meeting room and given one simple job: get ready. That is how the Solar Shield program began. Elena Cross was a young colonel back then, chosen because she had once led a team that fixed a failing power grid during a terrible storm in the Midwest, all without losing a single life. She had a gift for staying calm when everything else was falling apart. When they told her about the aliens, she did not scream or run. She asked one question: "How much time do we have?" The answer was 11 years. That was how often the sun's cycle grew strong enough to match what the enemy signal described. 11 years to turn a scared, divided planet into something that could survive a war from the stars. It was not enough time, but it would have to be enough. The first years were the hardest. Nations that had never trusted each other now had to share their deepest secrets. Old enemies became partners. Scientists from countries that once refused to speak to each other now worked side by side in underground labs, because the threat they now faced was bigger than any human argument. The world could not simply build normal weapons faster. Alien technology was far ahead of human tools, so the humans changed their thinking. Instead of trying to match alien weapons piece by piece, they decided to use the one thing they had that the aliens did not expect: knowledge of their own sun. and time to prepare a trap. Dr. Marcus Chen, the same man who cracked the first alien code, became the brain behind a new kind of science. He noticed something strange in the alien message. The Dominion feared solar storms just as much as they used them. Their scanners, their shields, their communication, all of it also grew weak during strong solar activity. The storm was not just a human weakness. It was a weakness for everyone. "They're not fireproof," Marcus said in one of the first planning meetings. "They're just betting that we're too weak to survive the fire long enough to fight back. But what if we're not?" That single idea changed everything. Instead of building machines to survive despite the storm, humans began to build machines that would work because of the storm. Old radio towers were replaced with new systems that used simple wires and analog signals, things storms could not easily destroy, the same kind of technology sailors used 100 years ago, but rebuilt with modern science. Fighter jets and ships were given backup engines that did not depend on delicate computer chips. Soldiers were trained to fight and communicate, using hand signals, mirrors, and sound, just in case every screen went dark. It was strange to train modern soldiers this way, like teaching them to use tools from history. But it worked, because storms could not stop human hands, human eyes, or human hearts. At the same time, deep under mountains and deserts, giant machines were built. Some were simple, like huge coils of copper wire meant to catch and store the storm's wild energy. Others were incredibly advanced, hidden away from public eyes, built using knowledge, slowly gathered by studying the alien probes that had been found and quietly taken apart. One of these probes had crash-landed in a Canadian forest 5 years into the program. It was badly damaged, but not destroyed. Engineers spent 3 years learning from its broken pieces. They still did not understand everything, but they learned enough to build one thing, a device that could turn the wild power of a solar storm into a weapon instead of a weakness. They called this project Sunfire. The team that studied the crashed probe was small, only 12 people, chosen because they were the best in the world at their jobs, and because they could be trusted to keep a secret for years. Among them was a young engineer named Priya Anand, who had grown up fixing old radios in her grandfather's shop. She never imagined that skill would one day help save the planet. "It's not magic," she told her team one night, staring at the strange metal shell of the alien probe. "It's just engineering we don't understand yet. Give me enough time, and I'll understand it." It took her 4 years, but she did. She found that the probe's outer shell was built to soak up energy from solar storms and turn it into a kind of shield. It was not built to attack. It was built to protect the aliens from the very storms they used against their enemies. That discovery was the key that unlocked everything else. If the Dominion could turn a storm into a shield, then perhaps humans could learn to turn a storm into something even stronger. Priya's small team grew into a much larger group, spread across 5 countries, all working on different pieces of the same secret puzzle. It took years of failure. Machines exploded. Power grids browned out during testing. More than once, a lab caught fire during an experiment gone wrong. But slowly, piece by piece, the humans built something the aliens never expected. While the scientists worked underground, the world above kept moving. Children still went to school. People still argued about small things, like taxes and sports and weather. Only a tiny number of humans, fewer than 10,000 people across the whole planet, knew that an alien empire was watching the sky, waiting for its moment to strike. General Elena Cross often thought about that strange truth late at night. The world she was protecting did not know it needed protecting. She had a daughter, 8 years old when the program began, who was now a young woman studying to become a doctor. Elena had never told her the truth. She had missed birthdays, school plays, and holidays, always called away for training exercises that were really secret meetings about an enemy from the stars. One day, Elena told herself, staring at old photos in her office late one night, I'll be able to tell her the truth. One day, when it's over, and it's safe. Dr. Marcus Chen had his own quiet sacrifices. He had once been a professor at a small university, teaching students about black holes and starlight, dreaming of simple things like winning awards for his papers. Now he spent his days studying alien code instead, carrying a weight few people could imagine. He rarely slept more than 4 hours a night. His hair had turned gray far earlier than it should have. But every time doubt crept into his mind, he remembered the words of the very first alien message. When your star grows angry, we will come. The aliens had given humanity a warning, without meaning to. Marcus intended to make sure that mistake cost them everything. As the years passed, the program spread its plans across the whole world, hidden in plain sight. Old, unused mines became secret hangars. Deserts that seemed empty on maps held buried machines the size of stadiums. Even ordinary satellites, the kind used for weather reports and phone calls, were secretly built with small parts that could switch to a stronger, hidden mode if the right signal was given. The equator coils, built under Colonel Achebe's careful watch, were perhaps the boldest idea of all. Instead of trying to protect machines from the storm's power, engineers built giant rings of copper and rare metal that could catch that power on purpose, storing it like a battery the size of a mountain range. If done wrong, the coils could melt or explode, with enough force to level a small city. If done right, they would give humanity its first real weapon, built entirely from starlight and fury. Testing the coils safely took an entire year, in complete secrecy, timed to smaller solar flares that came and went, without the public ever noticing. Each test brought the engineers closer to understanding a power no human had ever tried to hold before. By year 10, the pieces were finally coming together. Ships hidden on the far side of the moon were fitted with a strange hybrid design, half old-fashioned analog controls that no storm could easily destroy, half advanced technology inspired by the broken alien probe, built to work with the storm instead of against it. Soldiers trained not only with guns and machines, but with simple signals, flags, mirrors, and old Morse code, in case every screen in the world went dark at once. It was strange, almost old-fashioned, to see modern soldiers practicing hand signals under the stars, or pilots memorizing routes without relying on computers. But every drop of that old knowledge was now a weapon against an enemy who believed history itself was a weakness to be exploited. By year 11, everything was ready, or as ready as it could ever be. Nobody knew for certain if the plan would work. Nobody had ever fought a war against beings from another star. But for the first time in history, humanity was not walking blindly into the dark. It had a warning, years to prepare, and a plan built from patience, secrecy, and quiet courage. Now, as the storm outside grew wilder and brighter, all of that patient work was about to be tested against the true test of war. Sunfire was not one machine. It was a plan, spread across the whole planet. Giant coils near the equator, secret ships hidden on the far side of the moon, and thousands of soldiers trained to fight without modern tools if the power failed. All of it waited quietly for 11 years, waiting for the storm the aliens themselves had warned about. Not everyone believed the plan would work. In year 7, a group of world leaders tried to cancel the whole program, calling it too expensive and too strange. It was General Elena Cross, then newly promoted, who stood in front of them and said the words that saved the program. "They told us exactly when they were coming," she said. "They told us exactly what weakness they planned to use against us. If we throw this away, we are not just wasting money. We are throwing away the only warning gift an enemy has ever given us by mistake." The leaders listened. The program continued. Now, 11 years later, everything the humans built, trained, and hoped for was about to be tested. Back in the mountain bunker, General Cross moved quickly through the halls, her boots echoing on the metal floor. Around her, hundreds of officers were waking up, sitting at desks, putting on headsets. Screens that had shown quiet data, for years, now filled with fast-moving numbers. "Talk to me," Elena said, stepping into the main control room. A young analyst named Corporal Wu looked up, his face pale. "General, Solis Station confirms it. Solar activity is spiking fast, faster than the last 3 cycles combined. And there's something else." "Show me," Elena said. The main screen changed. It showed a wide picture of space near Jupiter, taken by one of Earth's oldest and least advanced telescopes, one that used simple mirrors and film, almost like a museum piece, chosen because it could not be jammed by outside signals. On the screen, tiny dark shapes moved against the stars, dozens of them, then hundreds. "Ships," Wu said quietly. "General, they're coming." Elena felt the room grow silent around her. 11 years of planning had led to this single, terrible, and strangely expected moment. "All bases full alert," she said, her voice steady, even though her heart pounded. "Wake General Torres in the Pacific Fleet. Wake Colonel Achebe at the Equator Coils. Tell Dr. Chen his project is about to be tested for real." Far below, across the globe, sirens did not scream through cities the way old movies imagined. There was no panic in the streets, because most people still knew nothing. Instead, quiet doors opened in mountains, deserts, and oceans. Hidden hangars revealed ships that news channels had never shown. Soldiers who had trained for 11 years for a single day finally put on their gear. In Kenya, near the equator, Colonel Amara Achebe walked along a massive ring of copper coils, buried under the red earth. The coils stretched for miles, quiet and waiting, like a giant sleeping snake. She placed her hand on a cold metal switch. "Sunfire coils, report status," she said into her radio. "All coils charged and ready, Colonel," came the reply, waiting for the storm's peak. In the deep quiet of space, hidden on the far side of the moon, a fleet of human ships sat dark and silent, their engines cold to avoid detection. Inside one of them, a pilot named Captain Diego Reyes checked his instruments one last time. His ship, like all the others, used old-style analog gauges next to new secret alien-inspired engines. It looked strange, half old and half impossible, but it was built exactly to survive what was coming. "Won't be long now," he whispered to his co-pilot. Back on Earth, Dr. Marcus Chen stood in a lab beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching numbers rise on his main screen. 11 years of work, arguments, failures, and small victories had led to this moment. "They think the storm is their weapon," he said softly to Elena, who had just walked in. "They don't know we've spent 11 years turning their own trap into our shield." Elena nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen, showing the alien fleet growing closer with every passing minute. "Then let's give them the welcome they deserve," she said. "Sound the final call. Humanity's ready." Outside, high above the clouds, the sun grew wild and bright, sending waves of fire into space. The storm the aliens had promised, and the humans had prepared for, was finally arriving. And with it, hidden in the fire and lightning of the sun's fury, the greatest battle Earth had ever faced was about to begin. For 11 long years, humanity had waited, trained, and built in silence, hiding their strength behind quiet skies and ordinary lives. Now, as the first alien ships crossed into the outer edge of the solar system, that silence was about to end. The Dominion believed they were arriving to catch a weak and unprepared world in a moment of chaos. They believed the storm would blind and cripple their enemy before a single shot was fired. They did not know that the humans below had spent over a decade turning fear into careful planning, and planning into steel, coils, ships, and soldiers ready to rise. They did not know that the very weakness they hoped to use had already been studied, tested, and turned into a weapon of its own. As the orange lines on Dr. Solis's screen climbed higher than ever before, she allowed herself one small, tired smile. "Come on then," she whispered to the coming storm, and to the fleet hidden within it. "We've been waiting." Far below her station, across the entire planet, hidden armies stood ready in the dark, watching the sky, waiting for the storm to reach its peak, and for the enemy fleet to finally show itself in full. The countdown that had lasted 11 years was down to its final hours. The alien fleet crossed into the solar system like a slow, dark tide. From far away, it looked almost peaceful, hundreds of small lights moving quietly between the stars. But every one of those lights was a warship, and every warship carried soldiers who believed they were about to conquer a weak and helpless world. At the front of the fleet floated a massive ship shaped like a curved blade, twice the size of any human battleship ever built. This was the flagship of the Dominion fleet, called the Veltarok, and it carried the commander of the invasion, a tall alien named Overlord Drassic Kor. Drassic had conquered 11 worlds in his long life. He had grown used to easy victories. Most young civilizations panicked the moment strange ships appeared in their skies. Most gave up before a real battle even began. He expected nothing different from the small blue planet ahead of him. "Status of the target world," Drassic said, his deep voice echoing through the command deck. A smaller alien officer, one of his data readers, answered quickly. Solar activity is at its peak, Overlord. Their power systems should be failing across the planet. Their satellites are already going dark, one by one. Drassic allowed himself a small, cold smile. Good. Let the storm do its work. We will simply walk in afterward. He did not know that on the ground below, in a mountain bunker, General Elena Cross was watching his fleet's exact movements on an old-style radar screen, one built specifically to keep working through the very storm the aliens were counting on. They think we're blind right now, Elena said quietly to the room. Let them keep thinking that a little longer. The truth was, most of Earth's newer satellites had indeed gone dark, exactly as the Dominion expected. Modern communication systems flickered and failed across the globe. News channels lost signal. Some countries even reported strange power outages, blamed publicly on unusual solar weather. It looked, from a distance, exactly like the collapse the aliens had been promised. But hidden beneath that visible chaos, the old-style systems General Cross's team had built over 11 years hummed quietly to life. Analog radios crackled with clear signals. Hardened radar stations, built with thick shielding and simple circuits, tracked the alien fleet with steady, careful eyes. It was not a collapse. It was a carefully planned disguise. As the Dominion fleet grew closer to Earth's orbit, ships began breaking off from the main group, heading toward different regions of the planet, just as satellite images from years of quiet human surveillance had predicted they might. Some ships moved toward North America, others moved toward Asia, Europe, and Africa. It was a careful, practiced pattern, one the Dominion had likely used to conquer many worlds before. They're splitting up, said Corporal Wu, watching the screen closely. Just like the old probe data suggested they would. Then we split up too, Elena said. Send the signal. Wake every base. Far below the Pacific Ocean, a hidden fleet of human ships began to rise slowly through the dark water. These were not ordinary submarines. They had been secretly built over the last 6 years, deep in hidden shipyards, using designs that mixed old submarine technology with pieces inspired by the recovered alien probe. Captain Diego Reyes, now aboard one of the larger vessels instead of his moon-based fighter, watched through a small round window as the ocean surface grew closer above him. All hands, final check, he said calmly. Today we find out if 11 years of hard work was worth it. Meanwhile, near the equator, deep under the red soil of Kenya, Colonel Amara Achebe stood before the massive sunfire coils, watching a wall of screens showing energy levels rising steadily. The storm above was feeding the coils exactly as planned, filling them with wild solar power, more energy than any human weapon had ever held before. 90% charge, an engineer called out. Hold steady, Amara replied. We wait for the signal from command. High above the clouds, the Dominion fleet continued its slow, confident advance. Overlord Drassic watched a large glowing map showing Earth's cities, marked with small red dots representing likely centers of resistance. To him, it looked like an easy game already half won. Send the first wave of scouts, he ordered. Let them clear a path over the largest cities. Once we confirm their defenses are truly dead, we begin the ground invasion. Small groups of Dominion fighters broke away from the main fleet, diving down toward Earth's atmosphere. Their sensors, like the humans expected, struggled slightly in the storm's wild energy, but not enough to stop them completely. They expected no real resistance. After all, human satellites were dark, human communication was scrambled, and human weapons were, as far as Dominion scans could tell, completely offline. What the Dominion scouts did not expect was the sudden appearance of dozens of strange aircraft rising from hidden bases across the planet. Aircraft that used no modern digital signals at all. Aircraft that flew using instruments almost as old as the airplanes of the last century, paired with engines built from stolen alien secrets. Multiple contacts rising from the surface, one Dominion pilot shouted through their communication system. They should not be able to see us. Our stealth systems are active. But the Dominion stealth technology, like everything else in the fleet, depended partly on advanced digital systems the storm was quietly weakening, far more than the aliens realized. The old, simple human radar, built specifically to survive such storms, cut through that weakened stealth like a light through fog. The first true battle of the invasion began. not with a grand explosion, but with a single human fighter jet, flown by a young pilot named Lieutenant Sarah Kim, locking onto a confused Dominion scout ship and firing a missile built using parts inspired by the very same alien technology the scout ship carried. The missile struck true. The Dominion scout exploded in a bright flash over the Pacific Ocean. For a brief moment, silence filled the Dominion command channels. Then confusion turned into shouted questions. "Impossible!" one of Drasik's officers said, staring at his screen. "Their weapons should not function like this during the storm." Overlord Drasik's calm expression finally cracked, just slightly. "Confirm the scout was truly destroyed." "Confirmed, Overlord. Direct hit. Their weapon matched patterns similar to..." The officer paused, checking his data again, clearly unsettled. "Similar to our own technology." Drasik's eyes narrowed. In all his years of conquest, no world had ever fought back with anything close to Dominion-level weapons, especially not during a storm meant to cripple them completely. "Send a full combat wing," he ordered, his voice sharper now. "Wipe out that fighter and anything near it. This must be a fluke, a lucky shot, nothing more." But it was not luck. It was the first small piece of 11 years of secret preparation, showing itself to the enemy. Across the globe, similar small battles began breaking out, each one a careful test of the plans humanity had built in silence. In Europe, hidden anti-air batteries, built to survive electromagnetic storms, opened fire on Dominion scouts flying low over quiet farmland, catching them completely by surprise. In Asia, human jets using old radio-based coordination, instead of modern digital links, worked together to trap and destroy 3 Dominion fighters in a narrow mountain valley. None of these battles were huge. None of them destroyed the main Dominion fleet, but each one chipped away at the alien empire's confidence, and each one proved something the humans had hoped for through 11 long years of hard work. The storm was not a weapon against Earth. It was a shield Earth had built for itself. Inside the Pacific Fleet, Captain Diego Reyes surfaced his hidden vessel, just long enough to launch a wave of fighters, timed perfectly, with reports coming in from other hidden bases. His ship, built in secret over 6 years, used a strange mix of old-fashioned periscopes and advanced targeting systems, borrowed from studying the crashed alien probe. It should not have worked so well together, old and new mixed like that, but Priya Anand's team had proven, piece by piece, that patience could make even mismatched parts work as one. "Fighters away," Diego said, watching through his old-style periscope as sleek human jets shot upward through the waves and into the storm-lit sky. Above him, the battle was spreading fast. Dominion scouts, confused by losses they did not expect, began calling for reinforcements from the main fleet. Overlord Drasik, watching the pattern of losses grow on his main screen, felt a small, cold seed of doubt begin to grow in his mind, though his voice stayed hard and commanding. "These are minor losses," he told his officers. "A handful of scouts destroyed by lucky ambushes. It changes nothing. Continue the advance." But even as he said the words, more reports came in. A group of 6 Dominion fighters, sent to punish the humans responsible for the first destroyed scout, found themselves flying into a sky filled with old-style flares and smoke, a trick the humans had studied from decades of forgotten air combat manuals. The flares confused sensors weakened by the storm, just enough for hidden human jets to strike from unexpected angles. Only 2 of the 6 Dominion fighters made it back to the fleet. In another part of the world, over the quiet plains of Mongolia, a Dominion patrol ship flew low, scanning for signs of resistance. It found none, until the ground itself seemed to open beneath it, revealing a hidden battery of missile launchers built into the Earth years earlier, disguised as ordinary farmland. The patrol ship never had a chance to report what it saw. Back in the mountain bunker, General Elena Cross watched report after report come in from around the globe. Losses on both sides were still small compared to the size of the full Dominion fleet, but every human victory was a message, quiet and clear. This world was not the easy conquest the Dominion expected. "They're starting to panic," Corporal Wu said, watching alien communication patterns grow faster and more chaotic on his screen. "Their coordination is breaking down." "Good," Elena said. "Let them feel exactly what they hoped we would feel. Confusion, in a storm they thought only we would suffer." Back on the Veltarok, Overlord Drasik studied the growing reports of lost scouts with a mixture of anger and confusion. In all his campaigns, he had never seen a species react this way. Most worlds panicked or surrendered. This one seemed to be fighting back, with calm, practiced precision, as if they had expected this exact attack. "Bring me everything we know about this planet's history," he demanded. "Everything. I want to know how a species this young could prepare for something they should never have known was coming." His question would not be fully answered for some time, but the truth, had he known it, would have shocked him even more than the growing losses. Humanity had known. They had received the very warning message the Dominion itself had sent, all those years ago, meant to frighten a helpless world into surrender. Instead, that message had become humanity's greatest gift. Elsewhere in the fleet, a Dominion officer named Set Malric, young and ambitious, watched the confusing reports with growing unease. Set had joined this campaign hoping to earn glory quickly, expecting an easy war against a primitive world. Now, watching scout after scout vanish from the tracking screens, he found himself questioning what he had been told about this mission. "Overlord," Set said carefully, "if I may speak, this does not match the reports we received about this world's technology level." Drassic turned his sharp eyes toward the young officer. "Are you suggesting our information was wrong?" "I am suggesting," Set said, choosing his words with care, "that perhaps this world knew we were coming, and prepared accordingly." Drassic was quiet for a long moment, his mind turning over the idea and rejecting it just as quickly. "Impossible. Our warning signal was meant to frighten primitive worlds into surrender before we even arrive. No species has ever used it to prepare a defense. It has never happened before." "Then perhaps," Set said quietly, almost to himself, "this is simply a world unlike any other we have faced." Drassic did not answer. He turned back to his main screen, watching his fleet's slow advance continue toward Earth's orbit, unwilling to admit, even to himself, that the young officer's words carried a truth he did not want to face. While the first skirmishes played out in the skies, deeper preparations were moving forward on the ground. In the Kenyan control room, Colonel Amara Achebe finally received the signal she had been waiting for. "Command confirms full engagement," an officer said. "General Cross authorizes Sunfire activation." Amara took a slow breath. 11 years of testing, fear, and hope had led to this single moment. She placed her hand on the main activation switch, a simple lever, built to look almost old-fashioned on purpose, so that no single failure of modern electronics could ever stop it from working. She thought, for just a moment, of the first time she had seen the Sunfire coils as nothing more than a rough drawing on a whiteboard, back when the whole idea seemed almost impossible. Back then, half the engineers in the room doubted it could ever be built. Now, standing beside the finished machine, feeling the low hum of stored power beneath her boots, she understood just how far patience and stubborn hope could carry a group of people willing to work quietly for over a decade. Around her, engineers moved calmly between glowing panels, checking numbers one final time. A young technician named Boaz, barely 25 years old, wiped sweat from his brow, despite the cool air of the underground chamber. "Colonel," Boaz said, "energy levels are steady. Whenever you're ready." Amara nodded. She thought of her father, a farmer who had worked this same red soil long before any of these hidden machines existed, a man who once told her that the land always gave back what patience put into it. She wondered, briefly, if he would ever know just how true those words had become, buried far beneath the very fields he once worked. Above ground, ordinary people across Kenya, and across every country hiding a Sunfire station, went about ordinary lives, completely unaware of the quiet drama unfolding beneath their feet. Some noticed strange colors dancing across the night sky, brighter and stranger than any storm they remembered, and simply assumed it was an unusually beautiful, unusually wild bit of space weather. None of them could have imagined the true size of the battle now beginning above their heads. Far above the clouds, the full Dominion fleet continued its slow approach, still confident despite the growing list of lost scouts. Overlord Drassic, watching Earth grow larger on his main view screen, allowed himself to believe that whatever resistance had appeared so far was simply the last desperate effort of a dying world, soon to be crushed by the true weight of his forces. He did not know that every scout lost, every fighter destroyed, had bought Earth's hidden defenses precious extra minutes, minutes that allowed 6 giant rings of stored power to reach their final, full charge, ready to unleash a force built entirely from patience, secrecy, and the very storm the Dominion had trusted to guarantee an easy victory. "Sunfire coils," she said, her voice steady, despite the pounding of her heart. "Prepare for full discharge." Around the world, in 5 other hidden locations just like hers, 5 other officers received the exact same order at the exact same moment. 6 giant rings of stored solar power, quietly filled by the very storm the Dominion had hoped would destroy humanity, stood ready to unleash everything they had gathered. High above, Overlord Drassic ordered his main fleet to begin its final approach toward Earth's orbit, still confident that whatever small resistance had appeared was nothing more than a minor annoyance, soon to be crushed completely. He had no idea that he was flying directly into the heart of a trap built from the very storm he had trusted to guarantee his victory. As the Dominion's massive ships spread out across Earth's upper atmosphere, preparing to begin their true invasion, 6 hidden coils across the planet reached their full charge, glowing faintly with power borrowed from the sun itself. General Elena Cross watched the final numbers rise on her screen, her jaw tight, her eyes fixed on the image of the approaching alien fleet. "All Sunfire stations, report," she said. One by one, 6 calm voices answered from 6 different corners of the world. "Kenya Station, full charge, ready. Nevada Station, full charge, ready. Siberia Station, full charge, ready. Australia Station, full charge, ready. Brazil Station, full charge, ready. Mongolia Station, full charge, ready." Elena closed her eyes for just a moment, thinking of everyone who had worked, sacrificed, and believed in this plan across 11 long years. Then she opened them again, her voice steady and clear. "All stations," she said. "Fire." The moment General Elena Cross gave the order, 6 giant rings of stored power, buried under Kenya, Nevada, Siberia, Australia, Brazil, and Mongolia, released everything they had gathered from 11 years of quiet preparation and the wild fury of the solar storm above. It did not look like a normal weapon firing. There was no single bright flash, no simple explosion. Instead, thin beams of pale golden light rose from 6 different points on the planet, climbing straight up through the clouds and into the storm-lit sky, joining together, far above the atmosphere, into one massive column of pure energy. Overlord Drassic felt it, before his sensors even fully understood it. The entire flagship shook, as the golden light struck the leading edge of the Dominion fleet, sweeping through a dozen smaller ships before they could react. "Report," Drassic shouted, gripping the edge of his command chair as alarms blared across the bridge. "Overlord, we've lost contact with the forward scout group entirely," an officer said, his voice shaking. "Their ships, they simply stopped responding. Sensors show massive energy discharge, origin point, the planet's surface." Drassic stared at his main screen in disbelief. A weapon of that size, capable of reaching from the ground into open space, was something even the Dominion, with all its advanced technology, rarely built. For a primitive world, supposedly crippled by its own sun, to produce something like this seemed impossible. "That cannot be a planetary defense," he said quietly, almost to himself. "No young species builds something like this." But it was real, and it was only the beginning. Deep in the mountain bunker, cheers briefly broke out among the younger officers as reports came in, confirming several destroyed Dominion ships. General Cross allowed herself only a brief, tight smile before raising her hand for silence. "This isn't a victory yet," she said firmly. "This is us proving the plan works. Now we finish it." Dr. Marcus Chen, standing beside her, watched the energy readings on his screen, with a mixture of awe and worry. "The coils performed exactly as the models predicted," he said. "But that was a single, full discharge. Recharging them to full strength again will take time we might not have." Elena nodded, her mind already working through the next steps. "Then we make sure the time we bought counts." Above the atmosphere, the surviving Dominion fleet scattered briefly in confusion, before regrouping under Drassic's sharp commands. Despite the shocking loss, the fleet was still massive, still powerful, and still far larger than anything humanity could match ship for ship. The golden beams had bought Earth valuable time and destroyed a meaningful portion of the enemy's forward scouts, but the true battle for the planet was only just beginning. All remaining ships, spread formation, Drassic ordered, his voice colder and harder than before. No more scouting. No more careful advance. We move directly to full invasion. Let them waste whatever remains of that weapon. We will simply overwhelm what's left. The Dominion fleet surged forward, no longer moving with careless confidence, but with grim determination. Massive warships broke from the main formation, diving toward different regions of the planet, their weapons charging as they entered the atmosphere. Humanity's hidden air forces rose to meet them. Over the Pacific, Captain Diego Reyes led a formation of human fighters directly into the path of a descending Dominion cruiser, 3 times the size of any ship in his own group. His jet's old-style radio crackled as he coordinated closely with 24 other pilots, all trained for exactly this kind of coordinated, storm-proof combat. "Target its underside," Diego called out. "Their shields are strongest up top. Hit where it's weak." Guided partly by instinct, partly by data gathered over years of studying alien technology, the human fighters dove low, skimming just above the ocean waves, before rising sharply to strike the Dominion cruiser from below. Missiles built from hybrid human and alien-inspired designs slammed into weak points along the ship's underside. The massive cruiser shuddered, sparks bursting from its hull, before crashing down into the sea in a massive plume of steam and fire. It was not an easy victory. 3 human jets were lost in the exchange, their pilots' names quietly added to a growing list that would later be remembered as heroes of the first true battle for Earth's freedom. But the Dominion cruiser, a ship meant to help conquer an entire continent, was gone. Similar battles raged across the globe. In the skies above Europe, hidden anti-air batteries worked alongside jet squadrons to bring down 2 more Dominion warships, though not without cost. In Asia, a massive ground battle began, as Dominion troop carriers attempted to land soldiers near a major city, only to be met by human forces who had trained for years in exactly this kind of defense, using tunnels, old-fashioned barricades, and precise coordinated strikes that confused the invaders at every turn. Back aboard the Veltarok, Overlord Drassic watched the losses mount with a growing cold fury. This was not supposed to happen. Every previous conquest had followed the same simple pattern: overwhelming force against a confused, unprepared enemy, quick surrender, easy control. Instead, this small blue world was fighting back with a level of coordination and hidden strength that matched, in some cases, the Dominion's own technology. "Bring me Set Malric," Drassic ordered sharply. The young officer arrived quickly, standing at attention before his commander. "Overlord, you suggested earlier that this world somehow prepared for our arrival," Drassic said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Explain how that could be possible. Our warning signal was designed to break the spirit of primitive worlds, not arm them." Set hesitated only briefly before answering honestly. "Overlord, I believe this species did something no other world has done before. I believe they listened to our warning, and instead of despair, they chose preparation. 11 years by their calendar matches almost exactly the time between their star's strongest storms. It is possible they used that time precisely as we gave it to them, only against us instead of in surrender." Drassic was silent for a long moment, staring out at the chaos unfolding on his screens. Finally he spoke, his voice quieter than before, carrying a weight of reluctant respect mixed with anger. "Then this will not be the easy conquest promised in our reports," he said. "This will be a true war." He turned back to his officers, his voice hardening once more. "Then we will fight a true war, and we will still win it. Bring every remaining ship into full attack formation. No more caution. No more careful plans. We break this world's defenses through sheer force, whatever the cost." The Dominion fleet, wounded but still massive, surged forward, with renewed aggression, no longer treating Earth as an easy target, but as a genuine enemy to be crushed, through overwhelming numbers. Back in the mountain bunker, General Cross watched the shift in enemy tactics with grim understanding. "They know now," she said. "They know we prepared. This changes things." "How?" asked a young officer nearby. "Before, they were careless, because they thought us weak," Elena said. "Now they'll throw everything they have at us, because they know we're not. The real fight starts now." Dr. Chen studied the incoming data streams, his brow furrowed in concentration. The sunfire coils won't be ready for another full discharge for several hours. Until then, we rely entirely on conventional forces, everything we built and trained for over the past decade. Elena nodded slowly, already turning to address the wider command network spread across the globe. Then we hold the line, she said. Every base, every unit, every soldier. We hold until the coils recharge. We've trained for this moment for 11 years. Now we prove it wasn't wasted time. Across the planet, humanity's hidden forces dug in, prepared to face the full might of an alien invasion fleet, with nothing but conventional weapons, careful strategy, and the same quiet determination that had built an entire secret defense program in complete silence for over a decade. In the skies above dozens of cities, human jets fought running battles against descending Dominion warships. On the ground, soldiers using tunnels, hidden bunkers, and old-fashioned tactics resisted attempts at ground invasion, with surprising success, catching overconfident Dominion troops in traps built specifically for this exact kind of warfare. Not every battle went in humanity's favor. In parts of South America, a Dominion assault managed to establish a small beachhead before being pushed back by reinforcements rushed in from nearby hidden bases. In Northern Europe, a fierce air battle resulted in heavy losses on both sides, before human jets finally forced a retreating Dominion squadron back into open space. In the mountains of South America, a small human unit, led by a sergeant named Rosa Mendez, found itself cut off from reinforcements when a group of Dominion soldiers landed nearby, their strange armored suits gleaming faintly, even through the stormlit haze. Rosa had trained for years in exactly this kind of scenario, learning to fight without relying on satellite support or digital communication, using only maps, compasses, and old-fashioned radios passed hand to hand. Spread out along the ridge, Rosa ordered her small squad. Use the old signals. No electronics unless we absolutely have to. Her soldiers moved quickly and quietly, taking positions among the rocks exactly as they had trained. When the Dominion soldiers advanced into the valley below, expecting no resistance from a supposedly crippled world, they were met with a hail of precise gunfire from positions they never detected in time. It was not an easy fight. 2 of Rosa's soldiers were wounded, 1 seriously, but the Dominion patrol was forced to retreat, leaving behind 2 of its own soldiers and a small amount of equipment that would later prove valuable to human scientists studying Dominion technology up close for the first time. Meanwhile, above the icy plains of Northern Europe, Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the same young pilot who had destroyed the very first Dominion scout of the invasion, now led an entire squadron into one of the largest air battles of the war so far. 8 Dominion fighters, faster and more heavily armed than anything human engineers had built from scratch, tore through the storm-lit sky, moving with a grace and speed that made Sarah's stomach tighten with fear. "Stay in pairs," she called out over the radio. "Don't try to match their speed. Use the clouds. Make them come to us." Her squadron ducked in and out of thick storm clouds, using the very chaos the Dominion had hoped would blind humanity as cover instead. The Dominion fighters, their own sensors weakened by the same storm, struggled to track the smaller, more maneuverable human jets weaving through the churning sky. One by one, using careful teamwork and old-fashioned visual tracking backed up by hardened radar, Sarah's squadron picked off the Dominion fighters, though not without cost. 2 human pilots did not return from that battle, their names added quietly to the same growing list as those lost over the Pacific. By the end of the engagement, only 3 Dominion fighters limped back toward the main fleet, badly damaged and forced into retreat. Through it all, General Elena Cross moved constantly between different command screens, coordinating a defense spread across the entire globe, drawing on 11 years of careful planning to respond to threats as they emerged. Beside her, Dr. Marcus Chen tracked the recharging sunfire coils minute by minute, calculating exactly when humanity's greatest weapon would be ready to fire again. Every few minutes, new reports reached the mountain bunker from around the world. Some brought good news: a Dominion warship destroyed over the Atlantic, a ground assault pushed back in Southeast Asia. Others brought grim news: a hidden base in the Middle East overrun after a long, hard fight, a squadron of jets lost defending a coastal city. Elena absorbed each report with the same steady calm, adjusting her orders, shifting reinforcements, always thinking 3 steps ahead. "Casualties are rising," a young officer said quietly, sliding a report across her desk. both sides. Elena looked at the numbers for only a moment before setting the paper aside. She had known, from the very first day the program began, that this war would not be won without cost. 11 years of preparation could reduce that cost, could give humanity a fighting chance it never would have had otherwise, but it could not remove the price of war entirely. Every soldier we lose today, she said quietly, mostly to herself, is buying time for everyone else on this planet, who doesn't even know this war is happening. Make it count. In the far corner of the control room, Colonel Amara Achebe's voice crackled through on a secure channel from Kenya, her equator station already working to recharge the massive sunfire coils as quickly as safety allowed. "General, charge is climbing steadily," Amara reported. "But if we push the coils too fast, we risk damaging them permanently. We need to balance speed with care." "Understood," Elena replied. "Push as hard as you safely can. We're holding the line up here, but we need that weapon back online as soon as possible." Dr. Chen, watching the numbers alongside her, allowed himself a small, tired breath. "At this rate, we'll reach the 80% threshold in roughly 35 minutes. It's not ideal, but it's close to our best estimate." "Then 35 minutes is what we have," Elena said. "Let's make sure the rest of the planet is still standing when that clock runs out." "Coils at 40% charge," he reported after nearly 2 hours of relentless, grinding battle. "We need at least 80% for a discharge strong enough to matter." "Then we hold 40 more minutes," Elena said, her voice tired but steady. "However long it takes." Above the clouds, Overlord Drassic pushed his fleet forward, with grim determination, unwilling to accept that a young, primitive world could truly stand against the Dominion's full might. Ship after ship dove toward the surface, weapons blazing, meeting fierce and unexpected resistance at every turn. "This world fights harder than any we have faced," Set Malric said quietly, watching the chaotic battle unfold from the bridge of the Veltarok. "Then we will simply fight harder still," Drassic replied, though for the first time in his long career of conquest, a small, uncomfortable doubt had begun to form in the back of his mind, a doubt that perhaps, just perhaps, this small blue world might not fall as easily as every other world before it. Far below, in cities and deserts and hidden bunkers across the globe, humanity fought on, buying time, minute by minute, for the moment when the sky itself would once again become their greatest weapon. In a quiet farming town in the American Midwest, ordinary people watched strange lights flicker across the night sky, unaware that far above them, human jets fought desperately to hold back an alien warship attempting to break through toward their city. A young boy named Tommy, no older than 10, tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed upward. "Mom, look, shooting stars," he said, smiling at the bright flashes streaking across the clouds. His mother smiled back, having no idea that those shooting stars were the wreckage of an alien fighter, destroyed moments earlier by a squadron of human jets, flying a desperate silent battle directly above her family's rooftop. It was, in its own strange way, exactly what General Cross and her team had hoped to achieve. A war, fought largely in silence, its true cost hidden from a public who did not yet need to carry that weight. Back in the mountain bunker, reports continued streaming in from every corner of the globe. Slowly, steadily, the tide of battle held, neither side gaining a clear advantage, both locked in a grinding, costly struggle across the skies and battlefields of an entire planet. Overlord Drassic, watching his own reports with growing frustration, finally allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. In all his years of conquest, he had never faced an enemy quite like this, one who seemed to have anticipated his every move, prepared defenses tailored precisely to counter his fleet's greatest advantages. He thought back to the ancient warning message his empire had sent to this world, meant only to frighten, never truly meant to be answered with such careful, patient strength. "Perhaps," he murmured quietly to himself, watching the chaotic battle rage on his screen, "we have made a grave mistake in underestimating this world." Far below, in the deep silence of a Kenyan control room, the sunfire coils continued their steady climb toward full charge, drawing ever closer to the moment when humanity's hidden weapon would once again rise to meet the enemy above. 35 minutes felt like a lifetime to the soldiers, pilots, and engineers, fighting across the surface of the planet. In the mountain bunker, General Elena Cross watched the seconds tick by on a small clock beside her main screen, each one measured against the cost of lives being spent to buy that time. Above the clouds, Overlord Drassic pushed his fleet harder than ever, sensing, without fully understanding why, that time itself seemed to matter greatly to his stubborn enemy. He ordered wave after wave of ships toward the surface, determined to break through before whatever the humans were waiting for could happen. "Concentrate everything on their largest cities," Drassic commanded. "If we cannot win through careful strategy, we will win through overwhelming force." Massive Dominion warships began converging on major population centers, their weapons charging for what would clearly be devastating strikes. In New York, London, Tokyo, and a dozen other cities, alarms finally began sounding for ordinary citizens, many of them realizing for the first time that something far larger than a strange storm was happening in the skies above their homes. "General," Corporal Wu said urgently, "multiple Dominion warships breaking through toward major cities. Local defenses are engaging, but they won't hold much longer against ships that size." Elena's jaw tightened. "Time until coils reach full charge." Dr. Chen checked his screen quickly. 12 minutes, maybe less, if Colonel Achebe pushes them harder, but that risks damaging the coils permanently. "Do it anyway," Elena said without hesitation. 12 minutes might be too long. Push them to the edge." The order went out immediately. Across 6 hidden stations around the globe, engineers pushed their machines beyond safe limits, watching gauges climb faster than any test had ever attempted before. Sparks flew from overloaded connections. Warning lights flashed red across dozens of control panels. But the charge climbed steadily higher, minute by minute, second by second. Above New York City, a massive Dominion cruiser broke through the last line of human jets, its weapons glowing bright, as it prepared to fire down into the heart of the city. Millions of people below had no idea how close they stood to disaster, many of them still believing the chaos in the sky was nothing more than an unusually dramatic solar storm. In the final seconds before the cruiser could fire, 3 human jets, low on fuel and ammunition, made one last desperate run directly at the ship's weakened underside, the same section of Dominion cruisers that Captain Diego Reyes had discovered was vulnerable during the earlier Pacific battle. The pilots fired everything they had left, their missiles striking true just as the cruiser's main weapon began to charge. The explosion lit up the night sky above New York, visible for miles, mistaken by most on the ground for an unusually bright flash of lightning. The Dominion cruiser broke apart before it could fire a single shot at the city below. All 3 human pilots ejected safely, parachuting down into the streets of a city that would never fully know how close it had come to disaster, nor how much it owed to 3 anonymous pilots who gave everything to prevent it. Similar desperate battles played out above other major cities. Not every one ended in success. In Tokyo, a Dominion warship managed to strike the outer edge of the city before being destroyed, causing damage and loss of life that would later be blamed publicly on an unusually severe solar-related accident, a cover story carefully prepared years earlier for exactly this kind of terrible possibility. On the ground near a coastal city in Southeast Asia, Sergeant Rosa Mendez's unit, still recovering from their earlier clash in the mountains, found themselves rushed forward to help hold a defensive line against Dominion ground troops attempting to secure a landing zone. The fighting was close and brutal, soldiers on both sides using cover and terrain in ways that reminded Rosa of stories her grandfather had told her about old wars fought long before advanced weapons existed. "Hold the line," Rosa shouted to her soldiers, her voice hoarse from hours of shouting over gunfire and explosions. "They push, we push back, we do not give this ground." Her soldiers, exhausted but determined, held their position through wave after wave of Dominion advances, buying critical time for reinforcements to arrive from a nearby hidden base. It was not glamorous fighting, no grand explosions or dramatic victories, simply exhausted men and women holding a muddy line, because giving it up was not an option they were willing to accept. High above, Lieutenant Sarah Kim's squadron, reduced now to only 5 aircraft after hours of continuous fighting, took on the grim task of intercepting a group of Dominion transport ships attempting to reinforce the ground battle below. Fuel was low, ammunition was lower, but Sarah pushed her tired jet forward regardless. "Last run," she told her remaining pilots over the radio. "Make it count." Her small squadron tore into the transport formation, using every trick and tactic they had learned over years of training, forcing 3 of the 5 transports to turn back before they could unload their troops. It cost Sarah her last missile and nearly her last drop of fuel, but the ground troops below would face a smaller invasion force because of it. Back in the mountain bunker, Elena watched the reports with a heavy heart, knowing that even a victory this large would carry a painful cost. "Time?" she asked quietly. 90% charge, Dr. Chen reported, his voice tense. "Almost there." Above the battle, Overlord Drassic grew increasingly frustrated as report after report detailed failed strikes and destroyed ships. His confidence, once so absolute, had eroded steadily throughout the long hours of fighting. "Overlord," Set Malric said carefully, approaching his commander with visible unease. "Our losses are approaching a level I have never seen in any previous campaign. Perhaps we should consider a tactical withdrawal, to regroup and return with greater force." Drassic's eyes flashed with anger at the suggestion. "Withdraw? After conquering 11 worlds without ever once retreating? I will not be the first commander in Dominion history to flee from a primitive world." "This world may not be as primitive as our report suggested," Set said quietly. Before Drassic could respond, a new alarm blared across the bridge of the Veltarok. Sensors detected a massive buildup of energy, once again rising from 6 points across the planet's surface. "Overlord," an officer called out urgently. "The ground weapon is charging again, faster than our estimates predicted possible." Drassic's eyes widened slightly. "Impossible. Their previous discharge should have required hours to recharge fully." They are pushing the system beyond safe limits," the officer said, studying the readings closely. "Discharge appears imminent." For the first time since the invasion began, true fear flickered across Overlord Drassic's face. He had underestimated this world once already, and the cost had been high. He was not eager to make that same mistake twice. "All ships," he shouted. "Emergency evasive maneuvers. Spread formation immediately." But 11 years of patient human preparation moved faster than Dominion panic. 6 golden beams of pure stored power erupted once more from the Earth's surface, climbing rapidly into the storm-lit sky and converging into a single massive column of light, aimed directly at the heart of the scattering Dominion fleet. The second Sunfire discharge struck with even greater force than the first, tearing through a large portion of the remaining Dominion fleet before they could fully scatter. Entire squadrons vanished from Drassic's tracking screens in an instant. The Veltarok itself shook violently as the edge of the beam clipped its outer shields, alarms blaring wildly across every deck. "Damage report!" Drassic shouted, gripping his command chair tightly, as sparks rained down around him. "Outer shields at 30%, an officer called back, his voice shaking. "We've lost contact with over half our remaining fleet." Overlord Drassic stared at the wreckage spreading across his main screen. Ships that had conquered 11 worlds now reduced to burning debris scattered across Earth's upper atmosphere. The overwhelming force he had trusted to guarantee victory had been cut down to a fraction of its original strength in the span of a single, brutal exchange. In the mountain bunker, cheers erupted once again among the officers watching the devastating results of the second Sunfire discharge. This time, General Cross allowed herself a longer moment to acknowledge the victory, before raising her hand for calm once more. "This isn't over," she said firmly, though a note of cautious hope had entered her voice for the first time since the invasion began. "But we've hurt them. Badly. Now we finish it." Dr. Chen studied the aftermath on his screen. Dominion ships scattered, damaged, and clearly no longer operating with any coordinated strategy. "Their command structure looks disrupted," he said. "If we push now, while they're still reeling, we might be able to force a full retreat." Elena nodded, already reaching for her communication headset. "All remaining forces, this is General Cross. The enemy fleet is critically wounded. Now is the time to push forward. Every unit still capable of fighting, converge on the remaining Dominion ships. Let's finish what we started 11 years ago." Across the globe, human forces that had spent hours fighting a desperate defensive battle now shifted, cautiously but firmly, into an offensive posture. Fighter squadrons, that had been scattered and stretched thin, regrouped quickly, moving to strike at the wounded remains of the Dominion fleet before it could recover. Aboard the Veltarok, Overlord Drassic surveyed the wreckage of his once mighty invasion force with a growing, bitter understanding. This was not the easy conquest he had been promised. This was, without question, the single greatest defeat of his long career. "Overlord," Set Malric said quietly, standing beside him amid the chaos of the damaged bridge. "Orders?" Drassic was silent for a long moment, staring out at the devastation surrounding his flagship. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with a bitterness that came from experience, not simple anger. "Signal all remaining ships," he said slowly. "Full retreat. We withdraw beyond the range of their weapon, and we do not return until we understand exactly what we have just faced." It was, Set realized, the first time in Dominion history that Overlord Drassic Corps had ever given the order to retreat. As the surviving Dominion ships began pulling back, scattering into the darkness of deep space, the storm above Earth slowly began to calm, its wild energy finally settling after its violent, historic role in the greatest battle the planet had ever known. On the ground near the coastal city, Sergeant Rosa Mendez watched through binoculars as the remaining Dominion soldiers suddenly broke formation, retreating in obvious disorder toward whatever transports remained available to them. She lowered her binoculars slowly, hardly believing what she was seeing after hours of brutal, grinding combat. "They're pulling back," she said, almost in disbelief, to the soldier beside her. "Confirmed," came the reply through her radio, General Cross's voice reaching down through the chain of command to every exhausted unit still holding the line. "All units, the enemy fleet is in full retreat. Hold positions, but do not pursue beyond your defensive lines. Let them go." Rosa allowed herself to sit down for the first time in nearly 6 hours, her legs finally giving out from exhaustion and relief. Around her, soldiers who had fought without rest through the longest night of their lives began to realize, slowly, that they had actually survived, and more than that, they had won. High above, Lieutenant Sarah Kim guided her badly damaged jet back toward its hidden base, running on fumes, her hands shaking slightly from hours of tension finally beginning to release. She had lost friends that night, pilots she had trained alongside for years, and she carried that weight heavily, even as relief washed over her at the sight of the retreating Dominion fleet on her radar screen. "Command, this is Kim," she said quietly into her radio, confirming enemy withdrawal, requesting permission to return to base. "Permission granted," came the reply. "Good flying tonight, Lieutenant. Come home." Beneath the Pacific Ocean, Captain Diego Reyes surfaced his vessel one final time, watching through his periscope as the storm-lit sky slowly began returning to its normal, calm darkness. He thought of the years spent building this hidden fleet, the doubts, the sacrifices, and the quiet hope that had carried the entire program through over a decade of secret preparation. "We held," he said softly to his crew, his voice thick with emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. "We actually held." In Kenya, Colonel Amara Achebe watched the Sunfire coils power down slowly, their massive stored energy finally spent after 2 historic discharges that had turned the tide of an entire planetary war. She placed her hand gently against the still warm metal of the coil housing, thinking of her father's words about patience and the land giving back what was put into it. "We did it, old friend," she whispered quietly to the machine, as if it could somehow understand the gratitude she felt. In the mountain bunker, exhausted officers watched the retreating enemy fleet with a mixture of relief and disbelief. 11 years of secret preparation, sacrifice, and quiet hope had led to this single, extraordinary moment. A primitive world, by Dominion standards, had fought back against an advanced alien empire, and won. General Elena Cross allowed herself, finally, a small, tired smile. "Send word to every base," she said quietly. "Tell them Earth is still ours." But even as celebration began quietly spreading through the hidden network of bases across the planet, Elena knew this victory, however historic, was not the end of the story. The Dominion had retreated, wounded and humbled, but empires rarely accepted defeat easily. Somewhere out among the stars, Overlord Drassic carried both the shame of his first true defeat and a dangerous new respect for the small blue world he had once considered an easy conquest. Back in the mountain bunker, General Cross finally allowed herself a moment to sit down, her body aching from hours of standing, coordinating, and carrying the weight of an entire planet's defense on her shoulders. Dr. Chen sat quietly beside her, both of them staring at screens now filled with reports of retreat rather than reports of attack. Casualty numbers? Elena asked quietly, though she already dreaded the answer. Marcus checked the incoming reports carefully. Still coming in, but early estimates suggest several thousand military casualties worldwide, and unfortunately, some civilian losses in areas where Dominion ships broke through before being destroyed, particularly near Tokyo. It could have been far, far worse. Elena nodded slowly, holding the weight of those numbers carefully in her mind, refusing to let herself feel only relief, without also honoring the cost. Make sure every name is recorded properly, she said. Every single one. When the world eventually learns the truth about tonight, they need to know exactly what was given to protect them. Marcus placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, a rare gesture of comfort between two people who had carried this secret burden together for over a decade. They held the line. Elena, because of 11 years of work, because of people like you who refuse to let this world walk blindly into disaster. Tonight, humanity is still here, still free, still unaware of just how close it came to a very different fate. Elena allowed herself a tired, genuine smile, the first true smile she had permitted herself since the crisis began. 11 years, she said softly. It felt so long while we were living through it. Tonight, it felt like it went by in a single breath. Outside the bunker, far above the mountains, the storm clouds that had covered the sky for hours finally began to part, revealing quiet, ordinary stars, the same stars that had, only hours earlier, hidden the greatest battle in human history within their light. The storm above Earth was finally calming, but far beyond the edge of the solar system, a much larger and more complicated storm was only just beginning to form. 3 months passed after the battle that would later be known, in the small circle of people who understood its true meaning, as the night of the storm. Life on Earth had returned to something close to normal for most of the planet's people. News reports about the unusual solar storm season faded quietly from headlines, replaced by ordinary stories about weather, sports, and daily life. Only a small, trusted group of leaders, scientists, and soldiers knew the true story of what had happened above their heads that night. But far beyond the edge of the solar system, the true consequences of that battle were only beginning to unfold. Aboard a heavily damaged Dominion ship, drifting slowly back toward the heart of the Empire's territory, Overlord Drassic Kor sat alone in his private quarters, staring at a small data screen showing the final casualty reports from the failed invasion. Nearly 2/3 of his fleet had been destroyed, or badly damaged. It was, by a wide margin, the worst defeat in his long and once celebrated career. A quiet knock came at his door. Set Malric entered, standing respectfully, but without the usual nervous energy he had carried before the battle. Something in the young officer had changed as well, hardened by what he had witnessed. "Overlord," Set said, "the Council has requested a full report on the failed invasion. They wish to understand exactly how a primitive world defeated a fleet of our size." Drassic was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Tell them the truth," he said finally. "Tell them we underestimated a species that used our own warning against us. Tell them this world is no longer to be considered primitive, nor an easy conquest." Set nodded slowly. "And what of future plans regarding Earth?" Drassic considered the question carefully. In all his years of conquest, he had never faced a defeat like this, but he had also never faced an enemy quite this determined, quite this clever. Something about that fact, despite his anger and wounded pride, stirred a grudging respect he had not expected to feel. "For now," he said slowly, "Earth will be marked as a world requiring far greater caution before any further action is considered. Whatever it takes to conquer that planet, it will not be through a single, careless attack ever again." Whether that meant a future attempt with far greater force, or a quiet decision to leave the stubborn, unexpectedly dangerous world alone, even Drassic himself did not yet know. For now, the immediate threat to Earth had passed, but the true, larger story of humanity's place among the stars was only just beginning. Back on Earth, in the mountain bunker that had witnessed the tense hours of the historic battle, General Elena Cross stood before a small, private gathering of the world's most powerful leaders, finally revealing the full truth of what had happened that night. It was a moment 11 years in the making, one she had quietly imagined countless times during the long, secret years of preparation. 11 years ago, she began, her voice steady, despite the weight of the moment. We received a warning from beyond our solar system. An alien empire told us, without meaning to help us, exactly when and how they planned to attack. We chose not to panic, we chose to prepare. She spoke for nearly an hour, detailing the solar shield program, the development of the sunfire coils, the training of soldiers and pilots for a war unlike any humanity had ever fought, and finally, the successful defense of the entire planet against a technologically superior alien invasion force. When she finished, the room remained silent for a long moment, the weight of what humanity had faced, and survived, settling slowly over the gathered leaders. Finally, the President of the United States, one of the very few world leaders who had known the full truth from the beginning, spoke quietly. The world deserves to know what happened, General. Not immediately, perhaps, but eventually. They deserve to know what was sacrificed to protect them. Elena nodded slowly. Agreed, but carefully, and with time to prepare people for a truth this large. The threat may return one day, and if it does, the world will need to be ready to stand together, not paralyzed by fear of what they don't yet understand. In the months that followed, the truth began to spread slowly, carefully, through trusted channels, eventually reaching the wider public in a series of careful announcements. People reacted with a mixture of shock, fear, and ultimately, a strange kind of pride. Humanity had faced an alien invasion, an enemy from beyond the stars, and had not simply survived, but had won. The first public announcement was made carefully, delivered jointly by leaders from a dozen countries who had, for over a decade, kept the secret locked away from their own people. They spoke not of fear, but of what humanity had accomplished when it worked together, quietly and patiently, toward a single shared goal. Old rivalries that had once divided nations suddenly seemed smaller, less important, when measured against the memory of a shared, hidden battle fought together in the dark. Not everyone reacted calmly. Some communities were frightened, worried that the truth meant further danger was still to come. Others felt betrayed, angry that such an enormous secret had been kept from them for so long. Governments worked carefully in the months that followed to answer questions honestly, to explain the difficult decisions made under extraordinary pressure, and to reassure a shaken but resilient public that the very secrecy that had frightened them was also the reason their world still stood at all. Slowly, steadily, understanding grew. Memorials were built in quiet corners of cities around the world, honoring soldiers and pilots whose true sacrifice could finally be spoken of openly. Names once hidden in classified files were carved into stone, remembered at last by a grateful, if still slightly frightened public. New international agreements formed in the following months, built on the same spirit of quiet cooperation that had powered the Solar Shield program. Nations that had once refused to share basic scientific research now worked openly together, determined never again to face a threat of this size without full unity. A new organization, simply named the Earth Defense Council, was formed, combining military, scientific, and political leadership from every corner of the globe, dedicated to studying the retreating Dominion fleet's technology and preparing more openly for whatever challenges the future might bring. Dr. Marcus Chen, finally free from over a decade of secrecy, returned briefly to teaching, though his classroom now included lessons about a war few students could have imagined possible only a year earlier. He often thought back to that first strange radio signal, the one that had changed the course of his entire life, and the lives of billions of others who would never fully understand how close their world had come to disaster. "We were given a warning, meant to frighten us into surrender," he told his students during one of his first lectures back at the university. "Instead, we chose to prepare. That choice, more than any weapon we built, is what saved this planet." Colonel Amara Achebe returned to her family's farm in Kenya during a brief leave, standing once again on the same red soil where the sunfire coils lay quiet and spent deep beneath her boots. Her father, now much older, walked slowly beside her, having finally been told, along with the rest of the world, the true story of what his daughter had spent over a decade helping to build. "You saved us all," he said simply, placing a weathered hand on her shoulder. "And you did it quietly, without ever asking for anything in return." Amara smiled, feeling for the first time in 11 years, the full weight of relief settle over her. "The land gave us the power we needed, Papa. We just borrowed it for a little while, and gave it back when we were done." Captain Diego Reyes remained with the Pacific Fleet, now openly recognized rather than hidden, training new recruits who would carry forward the lessons learned from the historic battle. He often told his students about the years of doubt, of failed tests, of long nights wondering if their strange, hybrid ships would ever truly work as intended. "We built something the enemy never expected," he told them, "not because we had better technology, but because we had more patience, and we were willing to learn from our mistakes without giving up." Lieutenant Sarah Kim, promoted after the battle, in recognition of her leadership during the desperate air campaigns over Northern Europe and the Pacific, carried the weight of her lost squadmates carefully, choosing to honor their memory by training the next generation of pilots with the same careful precision that had saved so many lives during the invasion. "We lost good people that night," she told new recruits during training exercises. "Remember them by being ready, in case this fight isn't truly over." Priya Anand, the engineer whose careful study of the crashed alien probe had made the Sunfire coils possible in the first place, finally received public recognition for her work, though she remained more comfortable in a quiet lab than in front of cameras. She used much of her new public standing to push for continued research into alien technology, arguing strongly that understanding an enemy was always the first step toward protecting against one. "We got lucky that a probe crashed where we could study it closely," she told a gathering of young engineers and scientists during a speech marking the one-year anniversary of the battle. "Luck brought us that first chance, but it was patience and years of careful, quiet work that turned luck into something we could actually use to save our world. Next time, we may not have luck on our side, so we must be even more prepared." Her words became something of a guiding principle for the newly formed Earth Defense Council, which began investing heavily in scientific research, education, and international cooperation, determined to ensure that humanity would never again have to rely so heavily on a single stroke of good fortune. Sergeant Rosa Mendez, promoted for her steady leadership during the desperate ground battles in South America and Southeast Asia, dedicated herself afterward to training new recruits in the same quiet, careful tactics that had helped her unit survive against overwhelming odds. She often told her recruits that the old ways, simple radios, careful positioning, and trust between soldiers, had proven just as important as any advanced weapon during humanity's darkest night. And indeed, though the immediate threat had passed, few among the small circle who knew the full truth believed the story was finished. Overlord Drassic and the Dominion had retreated, wounded and humbled, but empires rarely accepted a single defeat as final. Somewhere out among the distant stars, a wounded fleet carried news of an unexpected loss back to a civilization that had conquered 11 worlds without ever facing true resistance. General Elena Cross, now finally able to spend time with her daughter, now a young doctor herself, sat quietly one evening on the porch of her home, watching the stars appear slowly across a calm, clear sky. "Do you think they'll come back?" her daughter asked quietly, having finally learned the truth about the 11 years of secrecy and sacrifice her mother had carried alone. Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "Maybe," she said honestly. "Empires like that don't often forget a defeat, and they don't often forgive one either. But if they do come back, we'll be ready. We've learned that preparation, patience, and quiet courage can overcome even the greatest of odds." She looked up at the calm night sky, thinking of the storm that had once hidden humanity's greatest test, and its greatest victory. "And next time," she added softly, "we'll be even more ready than before." Far beyond the edge of the solar system, deep within Dominion territory, Overlord Drassic Kor stood before his empire's ruling council, delivering a report that would change how the Dominion viewed the small blue world it had once considered an easy conquest. "They call their planet Earth," he said slowly, choosing his words with unusual care, "and they are not the primitive, helpless world our old records suggested. They are patient, they are clever, and they are far more dangerous than we ever imagined." The council remained silent, absorbing the weight of a defeat unlike any the Dominion had faced in generations. "What do you recommend?" one of the council members finally asked. Drassic considered the question for a long moment, thinking back to the courage and preparation he had witnessed firsthand during the failed invasion. "I recommend caution," he said finally, "and respect. This is not a world to be underestimated again." Back on Earth, as the sun set quietly over a planet that had no idea how close it had come to disaster, Humanity continued its ordinary daily life, unaware for now of the true scale of the threat it had faced, and defeated, through 11 years of quiet, determined preparation. But somewhere, hidden deep beneath the ground in 6 locations around the world, the sunfire coils remained ready, patient and silent, waiting once again should the storm, and the enemy hidden within it, ever choose to return. Humanity had been warned once, and had used that warning wisely. If the day ever came again, they would be ready, standing together as one world, no longer divided, no longer unprepared, no longer underestimated by any enemy who dared to look down upon the small, stubborn, and resilient people of Earth. The storm had passed, but the stars above still held their secrets, and humanity, for the first time in its history, understood clearly that it was no longer alone in the universe, and no longer willing to face that universe unprepared.